Sometimes it seems like the world is run by chimpanzees, even though some of them might come with college degrees. It's getting hard to separate the facts from fiction, but I think I can say with obvious conviction that in this old world.
Welcome to Uncommon Sense. My name is Charlotte Laws, and today we're going to be discussing the Iraq War, the fair tax, which was brought to the fore by Governor Huckabee, who has been running for president, students who have been bound and gagged by their teachers, and yes, it is an epidemic, and a home buyer who's suing her real estate agent because her home has declined in value. But first, I want to introduce my guests. We have the cerebral Ralph Cissne, who is a writer and a creative strategist. And I understand cerebral Cissne is also a bit of an expert on sports.
Golf. That's all I can do.
Well, we won't be talking about golf today or sports today. Good. And we also have Garret Swayne, Swayne the Brain I call him, who is a songwriter and a singer, and who recently bought a house in Tennessee, sight unseen.
Right. Well, that doesn't really go in keeping with Swayne the Brain. It wasn't the smartest thing I ever did, but it turned out to be okay.
Is there anything else you've done sight unseen lately?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. Well, then we'll go on to the first topic, which has to do with the gap between the rich and the poor. People like Garret who have houses in Tennessee, against those like me who don't have houses in Tennessee.
Rich.
Yeah,
cash
and
flow statement.
If you've ever read the book, for example, Wealth and Democracy by Kevin Phillips, he talks about the gap and how it's getting larger and the wealthier are getting wealthier. A lot of it has to do with loss of manufacturing jobs. But there's a new study where they determined that those who are less educated and lower income actually have a lot more leisure time. So the gap between leisure time is also quite great. And the wealthy people and the educated people tend to be working all the time, according to this study. They also say it doesn't have to do with one's definition of what leisure time is, which I find hard to believe, but that's what they say.
Well, what are those poor people doing in their leisure time? Running a meth lab? I mean, what's...
Well, I mean, they're according to the article, they're
just taking it easy.
Yeah, they're hanging out. They're going to concerts. They're
not
watching TV. And I sort of think that maybe it has to do. I do think it's definitional, and I think that, you know, we have the Protestant ethic and the spirit of capitalism, which is this idea of being a workaholic is a good thing. And there's a huge segment of society who tend to be the people that are probably wealthier and maybe more educated who think that that's a positive thing. So if they're asked, you know, how much leisure time do you have? Oh, I don't have much leisure time. I work all the time, because that's actually something to be proud of to that group of people.
Yeah, I would say I don't have, although I probably have a lot of leisure time. I don't feel like I have very much. But I think that if you know, the obesity epidemic is any sign, what they're doing with their leisure time is basically riding the couch, watching TV, and eating more chips and drinking more soda. I mean. Yeah.
Well, I know that, you know, people always talk about redistributing income and that kind of thing because of the fact that there's this gap between rich and poor. But if those who are less fortunate financially actually have more leisure time, then that might be compensating for the lack of money.
That kind of raises an interesting question. It might be an interesting transition to the fair tax that you were talking about. Like, what is wealth?
Right.
See, a lot of people think, I mean, with regard to a tax system like the fair tax, you know, we want our tax system to be progressive in the sense that we want the wealthiest among us to bear the bigger portion of the tax burden than the poor. Mm-hmm. But the question is, what is wealth? Who is wealthy? I would maintain that the metric of wealth is not so much how much you earn, it's how much you spend. Because, you know, you can just squirrel away, you can make all this money and squirrel it away in the bank, but but until you spend it and you actually start burning it on really lavish, extravagant things, you're not really experiencing what wealth is about. And that's why I think it makes sense, if I can transition from that topic to the topic of the fair tax.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah.
I'm easy. that the people who earn the most money do not necessarily deserve to pay the most taxes. It's when they start spending. If you have a guy who makes $500,000 a year, but he spends almost all of it on lavish parties and extravagance, and a guy who makes $2 million a year but just squirrels it away and lives really modestly, I think the first guy, Mr. Lavish, should be paying more taxes than Mr. Frugal. And under the fair tax, he would, because you're really taxed not on what you earn, but what you consume.
Yeah, let me explain for people that don't know what the fair tax is. The fair tax means you would abolish the IRS, and what you would do is you would have, basically it's a 30% tax, although some people will say it's a 23% tax. It kind of depends on how you look at it. But
depends how you calculate it.
All goods purchased would have this tax. But however,
except for some essential goods, I think.
No, actually that's not true.
I thought there
and
was
then
exemptions.
Up to the poverty level, you would get a check from the government. So a single person would get up to the poverty level, which would be a $3,000 check every year. A family of 4 would get a $6,300 check per year, which would help you pay those taxes for your essentials, like your food and whatever it might be that you wouldn't want to be taxed on.
It compensates you for the taxes you would spend on the bare essentials of life. So the people who live at or below the poverty level, they are not paying tax at all, because whatever they're spending, if they spend all their money on basic essentials, all the tax that they're spending on that money is being, it's actually pre-bated back to them. They get a monthly check every month.
But the only taxes that they pay now in that bracket would be their sales taxes and their Social Security.
Well, sales tax is an example of a consumption tax. That's for the state. But in terms of, they might pay Social Security, they have payroll taxes. Indeed, people who are really, really poor, if you don't make enough money, you don't pay any income tax. But you're not relieved of the burden of having to file the taxes and, find your receipts and account to the government and fill out these, and usually end up spending, $100 to H&R Block.
No, like $600 to an accountant is what I have to spend. It's crazy, crazy.
Or you buy.
But they are going to still have to enforce, because there are people, the enforcement, I guess, is going to be on the end of selling products and being sure that they add the tax onto the products that are sold. And I don't know what things like, on the internet, sales over the internet, is that going to be taxed?
That will be taxed.
I assume houses are not going to be taxed. I mean, I assume
the things that will be taxed are things that are new, like used.
What about
things.
new houses?
New houses, new constructions will be taxed,
but not old construction.
Not old construction. However, the fact that if you buy you buy a new house is $200,000 a year with a tax, and if there's a used house, an old house, chances are if it's a comparable house, it'll sell for pretty close to $200,000, because just because the comparable value. I mean,
well, new construction does sell for more than older construction.
Well, whatever, the market will find its place, and you won't pay taxes on it. But the cost, whatever the final cost of a new house, it will include, 23% of that will go to the government. And that's just
Steve Forbes was talking about a flat tax in previous elections.
Well, that's a flat tax, and that's different.
That's a flat tax on income.
But all these things are theoretical and overlooks the elephant in the room, which is that the politicians use the tax system pretty much to solidify and sustain their power. So there's really no motivation for them
to.
But you couldn't
and the lobbyists
love the tax that with the fair tax.
Exactly, and that's why they don't like it.
They're the ones that write the law. So why would they legislate themselves out of power?
Well, because there will be, what I'm hoping is there will be such a groundswell, because it's a groundswell of opinion in support of the fair tax, that they will feel
I'm glad that Huckabee was able to bring this front and center and at least get people talking about it and understanding what it is.
It is a brilliant idea, because basically you got to understand, whatever we tax in society, we discourage. So if you tax income, I mean, it doesn't stop people from earning money, but people, when they think about, gee, do I want to start this second business? God, I'll be in such a high tax bracket. The government's going to be my silent partner anyway. I just as soon not do it. It inhibits enterprise.
I stopped working.
It encourages saving. It encourages, a lot of positive behavior.
You know what I'm saying? It inhibits enterprise when you tax income. But if you tax consumption, it inhibits consumption, which is another way of saying it encourages thrift and savings.
Yeah,
which
we have a problem with right now. We're running up our credit card bills like crazy.
Being a waiter and getting your tips in cash or whatever that is. I know I got
government still.
When I get out of college.
Yeah, illegals don't pay taxes. They would be covered. Illegal activity like prostitution or whatever. I mean, anything's going to be. Everything will be covered.
Tax.
Everything will be covered under the fair tax.
Yeah, but what about their health insurance plan? That's problematic.
Bookies and drug dealers, none of them pay income tax, but under the fair tax, they still go into stores and they buy tennis shoes and toothpaste and
so they're still contributing to the economy,
so
regardless
they
of
would
what
now be
their
brought into
job
the tax
is and
base.
whether they pay taxes
It makes
normally.
so much more sense.
No, I understand the general concept. I just don't think there's the political will to do it. I mean, we can talk about it all day long, but I know that when
unless people talk about it and get a groundswell going, as Garrett said,
I know
it's
when
not
I get out
happen,
of
but
college,
it could happen.
I got my first raise. And I go, whoopee! I'm going to have X amount of dollars, and then it was actually like nothing extra.
After you took out
Wow.
the taxes, right.
I was shocked. I thought I go, wow, that was like that's really rewarding you for working hard and making more money. Now I'm making.
And you're giving it to the government. See, I'd like to know what some of the candidates who have not embraced the fair tax, like McCain, or
like everybody else.
Like everybody else. Well, there was actually, I think, Duncan Hunter was in favor. Mike Gravel on the Democratic side was a Democratic candidate. He was in favor of the fair tax.
Oh, really?
He was a nutcase. Otherwise,
yeah, I liked it. He's a grumpy
but
old
he
guy.
was like the guy on Network. We're mad as hell.
I thought he was great. I liked him.
I know, but I'd like to know what their justification is for opposing it, because as I've studied it, and I can't see any counter argument.
Well, it's the loss of power, and the lobbyists don't like it because they use it also.
Of
so
course.
everybody manipulates with the tax code.
Everybody uses the
use
tax code to socially engineer the society we want.
The other tax
good.
idea was the flat tax, which you brought up earlier. And I remember in 1992 when Jerry Brown was running for president, and I was actually working on his campaign at the time, he wanted a 10%, there was a 10% flat tax that was proposed, which I did not like because it actually does penalize the poorest of people because it's 10% of your gross income. And so if you make $2,000 a year, you're paying $200 in tax, but you shouldn't be paying any tax. You should be getting tax credits back. Right. And also it penalized small businesses because if a business is trying to get their feet on the ground, it may take 3 or 5 years and they have a lot of write-offs. But with the flat tax, you pay it regardless. Even if you have a bazillion write-offs, it doesn't make any difference at all.
And the thing is, it's also, again, it's a tax on income, which we don't want to be taxing income.
Yeah.
We don't want to, income is the same as, we don't want to be taxing enterprise. And besides, it's much harder to monitor income than it is to monitor retail sales. I mean, to monitor the money, the earnings of every man, woman, and child in America is an impossible task.
I mean, you have gardeners and housekeepers and all
retailers
sorts
are already
of people.
collecting those taxes right now.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's much easier to monitor it at the retail level in stores. Just as we pay state tax on news. It's much easier to monitor that. You would need an organization 1/10 the size of the IRS to do that.
What do you think about Donald Trump's idea that he had in 1999? Remember, everybody who had a net worth over $10 million, he wanted them to pay like 14%. One-time fee to pay off the deficit.
Debt?
Yeah, and the debt on the
national debt.
Yeah, I mean, and now I know it's so high that this would not even be a feasible plan.
Well,
but I
it
mean,
might not
obviously
be
that's a redistribution of wealth.
Right. Right.
So.
Well, it's admirable that the Donald was willing to give up such a chunk of his cash. But I mean, he's got a point. It would be, the thing about the fair tax. This is another thing that one of the arguments in his favor is that, everybody they're collecting this money ongoing, and they're prebating back to everybody every month what would be the family consumption allowance that Charlotte was talking about, and so everybody's getting these prebate checks back. And I would contend that there could be a whole movement among the wealthy who don't really need these prebate checks to just sort of donate their prebate. And that, just give it to charity or give it to retiring the national debt, and that would be a way, for an additional way that I just on so many levels you can adjust the economy much better by. A lot of people feel that the 23% is actually kind of high in terms of what it would be, so they could notice if they're getting, experiencing excessive surpluses, they could sort of. Just ratchet that rate down a little bit, or bump it up. As you could adjust the rate, very easily. You can have a nice, predictable, ongoing source of government revenue. It wouldn't have to be this guessing game. And
yeah, but you have the groundswell of political thought is that you can get elected if you tell people I'm going to take from the rich and give to the poor. I mean, in California, it just seems like all the politicians run that way.
Right. Right.
Speaking of that, religion. Religion and anxiety, which is the next topic, which they did a study, and apparently they found out that men get depressed when they go to religious services. Not all men, but a large number of men. And women, it actually takes them out of depression and makes them less anxious and less likely to get into becoming an alcoholic or that kind of a thing. And
men get depressed going to church?
Yeah. And it reminded me of, I don't know if you've read Christopher Hitchens' book, God Is Not Great, which he, you know, it's kind of rehashing things like Bertrand Russell used to say.
Is he an atheist? He's an atheist?
Yeah, he's an atheist, and
yeah.
he believes that religion is violent, intolerant, irrational, manipulates children, that kind of thing.
The opiate of the masses, that kind
yeah,
of thing.
basically. I mean, it's the old line, you know, but he writes a whole book about it and puts his own experiences in it.
And I like some of his writings in
he's a good
other
writer.
areas.
Yeah.
Yeah, politically, but I don't know about that.
So Dennis Prager, who's a radio talk show host, he gave a challenge to him, and he said, if you were, because, you know, he was talking about how it's scary, you know, people that are religious are scary, is what Christopher Hitchens was saying. So Prager said, well, if you were going down the street and you see a group of guys, if you knew they just came from a prayer meeting, would you feel safer than if they were just a group of guys walking down the street? And Hitchens said no, but you know, that was Dennis Prager's argument. I mean,
you wouldn't feel any safer in a group of guys coming back from a prayer meeting?
Well, it depends on probably what religion it was. But I mean, I've seen these movies with all these fanatic religious people, and I think of that in my mind. And so it depends, really.
Real world experience. I grew up in the Bible Belt, and I got very depressed going to church. So as soon as I got to a point where, you know, my parents would allow me not to go, I said, that's it for me. But I don't discount the value of my experiences there and what I learned. And I have many friends that are religious people who go to church, and you know, I don't discount, I don't think they're scary just because I disagree with them, just because I have a broader view of what, you know, religious or spiritual experience is. But at the same time, I don't want them opposing their, you know, intelligent design or any of that kind of stuff on me, because that makes me more than depressed.
I mean, when I was in college at University of Florida, it was extremely religious in like 1978 when I went there. And people, born-again Christians, were literally knocking on my door every single day, you know, wanting to have, you know, trying to convert me.
Guns.
And I always ended up also with the roommate who was the born-again Christian in some different kind of religious, you know, segment of it. It wasn't just like, you know, Episcopal, or, you know, it was like some outlandish thing, and so I was dealing with that all the time, and a lot of proselytizing that went on. And
yeah, my strategy was to join them early, embrace it, and then, you know, then get out.
Well, I mean, my sense is that most of the people that I've encountered, I haven't encountered any Christians that I think are really scary or intolerant. I mean, they have their views, you know, and they want to share them with me, but I think that they. See, I feel we should be a tolerant society, but the one thing we cannot tolerate is intolerance. So there are some religions, I mean, there's some sects of Islam nowadays that are so intolerant that they're actually preaching, you know, that the Quran instructs that those who do not embrace Islam have to be put to the sword, you know, to purify the world, and that is a dangerous belief.
Yeah,
so,
it's like I'm sure that the women in Saudi Arabia have much more anxiety than the women in Atlanta that go to a Baptist church, for instance, because in Saudi Arabia, if you have sex out of marriage, they can, you know,
burn you,
stone you, beat you, imprison you. I mean,
if you
scary.
paint your fingernails, your fingers are to be chopped off, you know, according to, you know, extreme, you know.
Well, I know you supported the Iraq War, which, I mean, I was always against the war, and I was also against Afghanistan. I didn't think we should have gone into either.
Can I just say one thing? When you say I support the war, nobody wants war.
Well, you've always been an advocate for, for thinking we should be there and supporting the president's decision on that issue.
I thought it was a good idea that we liberate Iraq. You know, that we liberate Iraq from a really dysfunctional, you know, brutal leadership, you know, that was impeding any sort of progress.
Well, there's brutal leadership all over the world. I mean, there's many countries.
The irony is a lot of people, and I was an early supporter of George Bush on this issue. A lot of people look at us or Hugo Chavez and Venezuela, like there are people like this all over the world, and we actually are in business with them, just like we were in business with Osama bin Laden. We were in business with
with
Saddam Hussein, yeah, we were in business with the Shah. I mean, we create these monsters, and then we go, oh, now we got to go take them out.
Well, the thing is, you know, I have to say in George Bush's defense, which I really don't like doing, but his new policy that, you know, what he realizes that, you know, in our previously we traded democracy for stability, and we turned a blind eye when these repressive dictators would oppress their people. We just said, just keep the oil flowing and be and just stand with us against the Russians, and you're okay with us. And he's now saying that that's not enough. We have to really stand with the people and pluralism and democracy, that sort of thing. Now, if I'd known he was going to be so stupid in the execution of the war, I would have said, don't do it, George.
See, I just don't like the fact that one thing I hate now is that we spend so much money. And what I read is that we're spending $300 million a day. That's actually what I just read. And that the cost of the war, I found one resource that said $500 billion. The New York Times said $1.2 trillion, and the Boston Globe said $2 trillion.
Yeah, but
not yet.
But
well, that's what we're looking at before we get out.
What small percentage of that would it take for us to establish solar panels so they could be mass produced and affordable by every person
if
in
we
America?
had we could have universal health care for 30 years and use that money for that. We could have put that in place. Because that's only $34 to $69 billion a year for universal health care. So we could have actually paid for that for 30 years. Up to 30 years of people would have been covered by that, which I think would have been wonderful.
Nobody likes the expense. I mean, that's true. But the fact is, if we fail in Iraq and it completely encourages and emboldens terrorists all around the world to just strike and strike and strike, what's going to be the cost of that? You know, I think the consequences of our failing in Iraq are going to be so catastrophic that I agree with John.
So you think we should stay?
I mean, stay until.
I mean, at this point,
until we fix.
I sort of trust him to be able to handle it.
Especially since we're starting to see success there.
Yeah,
especially since that's the one thing that really troubles me about Obama, that he's going to just snatch defeat from the jaws of victory by pulling out.
I think that a new chief executive comes in, they sit down and say, well, here's the reality of the situation, and he'll go, oh.
I'm hoping.
But you can't turn, I mean, first of all, it's impossible to start bringing those people home immediately. You have to it's a huge logistical issue. So
what about staying there for 100 years?
Well, but you know what? That was a misstatement by
McCain. No, I think he's just talking about overseas bases. We have like 702 overseas bases currently, and I think he's just talking about having something like that in place.
And we'll have to have a presence there, just like we have a presence in a lot of places.
If they don't want us, I say get out.
Yeah.
If they don't want, it's up to them. If they want us to be there, we'll do it as long as it's not too much of a burden on our economy. Because really, we're spending billions of dollars keeping troops still in Europe when they're really not necessary. I don't see the point of that. You know?
Yeah, we're spending a lot of money on it. That's true. Yeah. I was going to go to the next topic, which has to do with cars that are being developed. It's nanotechnology, and it has to do with when you sit in your car, there's going to be a device, and you have to blow into it to show that your alcohol level is low enough or non-existent in order to be able to have the car turn on and go.
They have those kind of devices now for people who have had DUIs and want to get their license
back. They're talking about doing it across the board for all vehicles, and then as you're driving, it would detect, you'd have to keep blowing into it periodically, or this loud alarm would go, and you'd have to shut off your car.
A blow and go system.
Or it would measure through the steering wheel. Somehow it could tell through your skin whether you had alcohol in your body.
I think that's a little oppressive, I think
it's very oppressive.
Yeah, it's a little too Big Brother.
It's very much, and I think it could malfunction, because when I go in the bathroom, they have this new water, how the water comes out, but you have to put your hands underneath. It doesn't come out for me. My hands are too cold, apparently. I have to get strangers in the bathroom. Could you put your hands under to get my water?
Is it the heat sensor?
It's a heat sensor, I guess, because my hands are always too cold to get the water on. I sit there with soap.
Do you show up in mirrors? I'm just curious. There are photographs.
I also think there could be an emergency. Somebody could be coming after you, and you wouldn't be able to start your car because you had some alcohol.
Bad guys are chasing you.
That's right. It could be bad guys.
And you've had a little.
That's right.
The drunk driving is a huge issue, and I've known people who had problems with that, and they need to be able to make a living, because if they can't do that, then we slip down into another set of realities that is even worse. So the monitoring systems, I think, are beneficial for people who already have a problem.
Right.
But for mass
Yeah, I think it's
production,
fine.
Yeah,
Yeah, if
yeah.
it's people
Yeah.
that have already
it's a
been.
little Big Brotherish.
Right,
I don't
right.
like
Yeah, I
it.
agree. They're also talking about.
I believe in responsible alcoholism.
And that's what you practice, right?
That's right.
They're also going to coming up with self-driving cars. That's another thing that's coming out, where they have lasers and video camera controlled by a computer. It's hard for me to even believe it could work, where you just sit there and the car is actually going to drive itself. It
like
seems
a
really
ride on
scary.
Tomorrowland.
I know.
Yeah,
It seems less more likely than sex with robots. That was a different topic.
That was a different show altogether, last show. Well, I also found an article about slaughterhouse workers, which is a very serious topic. And I mean, one of the things that I have a problem with is they're coming up with all these, finding articles on slaughterhouses, but having the abuse of the animals, the torture and the murder of those animals overlooked completely. But this particular article was about those who work taking out pig brains, and they're getting something, and they work at the head table, it's called, and they, 11 workers in this particular facility cut up 1,100 pigs per hour, their heads, and so that somehow they're inhaling these, whatever they are, contaminants, and having neurological problems and dizziness and all sorts of some things that cannot even be reversed. And it's really, the conditions for workers are extremely poor in these slaughterhouses.
I just think at a karmic level that if they didn't get any poisonous or toxic things from the materials, just at a karmic level, that has to make you sick. It makes me sick to even think about it.
I don't understand how people could work in places like that. I just like beyond me.
You
and
know.
I really think if you were to publicize, I mean, like have a TV station that was like slaughterhouse station where people could watch what's going on, people would be vegetarians. They'd stop eating the meat.
The movie Fast Food Nation, if you haven't seen it, you should see it, which is essentially touches on this subject and about illegal immigration. And it's sad. It's sad. So, yeah, I don't eat a lot of meat. And I don't drink a lot. I'm really, the older I get, the more I'm trying to kind of like purify what I'm doing, what I'm around, and how I'm.
Yeah, 3/4 of the people that work in slaughterhouses don't speak English, which also is a hazard, because if you've got some people that speak one language and other people that speak another, you can't even communicate properly to be safe. And you also obviously don't have union representation that's significant, and you have, the bosses are trying to deter complaints about conditions and this and that. So it's a real big problem. Well, we're not going to get to the other topics, unfortunately. However, we're going to have the topics that we didn't get to on the next show. So hopefully you'll both be there.
All right.
And so thank you for joining us today. We hope we brought some uncommon sense into your life. As you putter through your day, remember, everybody's wrong but me. See you next time.
That really chaps my eye. I thought it all through so very carefully. There's no point even considering the other side. Still I'll keep on trying to remain the magnanimous type. I'll ignore all the vicious slander and the petty slights, but with the balance of the universe be disturbed. If I finally got some of the credit I deserved, it's hard keeping humble within myself when I'm so much better than everybody else. You'd think it was a blessing, but I tell you, it's more of a curse.